All right. Oop, we're live.
Awesome.
Welcome everybody to getting to Hell Yes in multifamily and BTR SFR. Guillermo Salazar here, your host. Looking to dig in on the Getting to Hell Yes buyer experience and talking to sellers within the market and really learning from everybody in terms of what they're looking for and tracking with respect to finding buyers that are seeking alternatives. Getting to Hell Yes buyer has needs that are prioritized. They're looking to solve a problem. They're actively trying to figure out what things they can do to try and solve that problem. They might not know about the product that we sell or our solution, but they're actively looking for alternatives because their goals are blocked. So today we've got Stephen Rea from Chasing Tomorrow. Chasing Tomorrow is an AI-enabled kind of training content creation tool that solves a problem around the ever-growing tech stack that multifamily companies are looking to buy into. And I think that as we go into a world of platform with the tech stacks, we're going to have more and more systems of engagement that are kind of like that are emerging. Complicate that with staff turnover in multifamily, and we have a big problem that we got to solve from a training perspective. So, Steve, do you mind giving yourself a quick introduction and how'd you end up with this role?
Yeah. So again, my name's Stephen Rea, and I started Chasing Tomorrow almost exactly a year ago now. After having spent the previous almost 20 years kind of being that buyer. I was on the buy side of prop tech for a long time. Led technology at one of Roscoe for the first few years that I was there, which became RPM Living. And then have always been really kind of involved and around it throughout my time in the industry. And I got kind of frustrated with prop tech at the end of last year, and part of that was I didn't feel like things were solving the problems that I thought needed to be solved. Everything was 85-90% of the way there, but it was missing that last little bit that made it really functional and pragmatic in terms of adoption for operators. And I realized that one of the biggest inhibitors when I was looking at prop tech was not how good is the product or what's the ROI on the product, but how do I implement that product effectively across my organization? Everything we do in multifamily ripples into everything else. So a point solution may seem simple, but when you take a step back, that one narrow thing that it solves actually touches 10, 15, 20 other things that also may need to get adjusted, may need to be adapted, whether that's training content, whether that's documentation, whether that's reframing for teams on how they think about things and solve problems in a different way now that they have access to more data. And that was such a massive glaring hole for me that ultimately led to the creation of Guided, which is a tool to streamline and simplify the creation of software training content for any company, but really I'm targeting multifamily and property management companies because of that pain that I felt when I was trying to build training teams, when I was trying to build these products. And then our latest shift are these transformations because weirdly, I built a product to make the adoption of prop tech easier. And then I realized that even my product was having trouble getting adopted because of the setup time and because of the implementation and the actual creating of the training content that it enables.
Like deployment, the people is a problem, right?
Correct. It's the and prop tech has talked for a long time about the API side of things and the data exchange side of things. Yep. What we're lacking is really a cohesive people implementation side of things. A lot of point solutions don't have the greatest content, so they leave it to the PMC to really solve that problem. And that's not something that most of them have the bandwidth or a lot of times the capability to do. I remember talking to people at large management companies who would say we can do like 2 or 3 things a year. Just based on the change management, everything else that went into it, which is part of why the industry's lagged for a long time in technology adoption. And that just felt like something that wasn't sustainable. And the other thing that I saw happening was our training for new teammates and for teammates as they join companies was shifting to where it was all software training. We weren't teaching people how to run properties anymore. So that was a byproduct of that issue.
Like a walk me, like a kind of follow click the dots kind of thing, or click the mouse click kind of thing.
Absolutely. So that's part of it. I mean, that's maybe even the some of the best case of what's out there right now, right? Of that interactive follow through, which is part of what we're able to create with Guided. So I'll take a quick step back. Um, Guided allows someone to capture their browser activity and turn it into a step-by-step guide, an interactive demo, and a video overview from that one single recording. So you
Yeah.
capture a workflow or a process. Let's use creating a guest card for a leasing agent, or maybe creating a work order as an example. You capture it once, and you get the 3 output formats so that you can make that accessible to your team at wherever they need it, whenever they need it, to get that quick refresher on how to do something.
Sure.
And most companies aren't able to produce all of those for every process that they really should, much less all 3. Or they're not able to even create like the step-by-step guides a lot of times. There's a lot of stuff that's just kind of passed around from teammate to teammate. Here's how we do this when someone gets to a property.
And presumably it could be like even like how to sign up for your benefits, how to sign up for how to even like whatever, right?
Actually, absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because that's actually the other side of it that I've been thinking about recently. Is it's not just prop tech, right? It's your whole HRIS system as well. Like it's any software that a team has to interact with. And again, coming from the operations side of the business, even like something like fixing a time card is something that happens at every company, all the time on, hey, this was submitted wrong. And that is a huge friction point a lot of times for organizations on getting payroll done. And if you could just solve that by giving people tools on how to do that the right way, you save a ton of time that's going to be reallocated to other things. So absolutely.
So what's out there today? Like what would they, before this came out, what were they using? What are the alternatives out there?
So this space was really kind of born in 2020. So there's a handful of other companies out there that do somewhat similar things to Guided. They don't have the all 3 formats in one interface like we do. They also don't have the services side to build it out. But before that, it was really software like Articulate or Captivate, where people were building SCORM based educational workflows if they were trying to do something kind of really robust. Outside of that, is a lot of people using, I forget the name of the product, but there's a bunch of them where you could snipping tools, right?
Loom.
Yeah, like I was gonna say, Loom's one where you can have the video element. There was the people who make Camtasia. That's a software I used when I was at Roscoe to make this sort of stuff.
Right.
I used Camtasia to make training videos and how-to videos, and it was really time consuming. And it was never really everything you needed, right? That was okay. That's a video, but you also need something interactive. You also need a reference guide that's step by step for other and humans. We all learn differently. So that single modality really doesn't solve the problem, because you have to meet people where they are to really effectively teach them. And again, all those kind of came together, and I recognized that, hey, there's this cool opportunity here to help. And frankly, teaching and training is probably the thing I love most, that I've done in my career, is the thing I enjoy doing the most, even still today. And it is just a glaring issue, especially, the larger companies, they have the scale to have larger teams building this out. But if you're a management company today, you have less than 30,000 units, especially if you have, like, say, less than 15,000 units, you're trying to adopt the latest in prop tech.
Yep.
You don't have a training department. You maybe have a trainer, but that trainer is actually, is also your kind of IT person, your troubleshooting person. They wear a bunch of different hats, and they're actually spending time helping people. They don't have time to create content. It becomes a huge gap, and it's part of one of the things that I think fuels the constant turnover rate that we've had that's been climbing. Well, it crested 30% in 2011. And it's stayed steady at above 30% since then. I think in the pandemic it peaked at near almost 40. But that the fact that we're having to spend so much time teaching people how to navigate software as opposed to how to operate a property, I think is what causes a lot of the burnout and the stress and the overwhelm that people are constantly reporting, when they're fairly new to the business.
And so in what role, who's the budget holder for this kind of problem?
The management companies that we're targeting right now are primarily the smaller management company. Like I said, probably 20,000 units and under. So a lot of times that's probably going to be your VP of ops. It's going to be, someone who's dealing with the people every day who are suffering from these sorts of
Mhm.
things, are seeing the performance issues on the back end. Although you could also say maybe an HR director, because onboarding's a huge part of this. Onboarding. Uh, I've actually been reading a lot and trying to study onboarding a lot the past couple months. That's really getting everybody off on the right foot. And
Yeah,
I don't think I had appreciated the difference between onboarding and training, because there is
sure.
one. It's subtle, but it's there. So HR, I would also say, would probably be, HR lead might be the other by uh, decision maker, just
Mhm.
because it can help facilitate so much of getting someone off on the right track from day one. When they start in a new role.
So is it a situation where like the RM is feeling the pain because they're trying to deploy people, they're trying to onboard people, and then they're finally saying, "Hey," like talking to HR, saying, "I need a solution." Like this
I
is just
think
the question I want to ask is like, who's the ideal hell yes buyer, right? So who's feeling the pain that is
um,
able to either access or influence access to the discretionary funds to buy the solution?
Yeah, I would say it's again, organizational structure plays a big role here, right? Like
Yeah.
some companies, small companies might be an RM, some it might be a VP of ops, some it might be COO or something like that. But
Hmm.
or HR who's constantly hiring, because that's really, when you have a 30+% turnover rate, you're hiring all the time. I mean that when you do the math on that, that means since 2011 the industry's restaffed itself completely over 4 times. Um,
Yeah,
you know,
and in certain roles, you see it at 50%, right? Like in
and
maintenance, it's 50%.
yeah, maintenance and leasing,
Leading agent.
your two entry level roles, are the ones that you churn through
Yeah.
the fastest. Um, and those people, I think those are the people who probably feel the pain, but they're vocalizing it by just quitting, right? So
Well,
the other side of that,
the users, like the role, the
correct?
leasing agent, the maintenance tech. Yeah.
Yep, who gets just dropped into the deep end of the pool, and is told to figure it out. And you have, if let's think about the tech stack today at a lot of companies. They might have, 20, 30 different softwares that they're bouncing between, 10 plus dashboards. And that's just getting dropped on a lot of people and just saying, here, learn this, as opposed to building in some structure, and having something that's easily accessible. Something I was talking to someone about recently is the difference between support and resources. So a lot of companies will have resources like, hey, you can go look it up and you can find this. But if you have to go search for it, someone who's in the moment and trying to solve something, it's a bit of a struggle. Um, and so having something that's a little bit more readily accessible that fits into the workflow of someone, which we're also able to do with guided, makes a big difference.
So I'm going to be, I'll play the role of the buyer, right? Um, I'm, something's happened that I need to do something. Let's say I've just like, maybe I worked, let's say 3 months to find a person, a maintenance tech, sorry. And the maintenance tech comes on, can't get productive, they can't ramp, and then they churn out, they bail. Now I'm back I've got an empty hole in a building, and I've got to go staff that again. And I might think that maybe I hired the wrong people. Maybe I, just blaming the market, or they got poached, they left for money or whatever. And then, I'm going to learn that it's the onboarding experience. Like what happened with this, uh, Austin Smith? How come they turned out, right? And then, I'm going to do something about it. And so now I'm going to go look for solutions that make the onboarding happen. Or maybe what happens is that, I'll frame it again. I just want to confuse the buyer. So you onboarded something. This is probably more likely. You onboarded someone, and day zero, they get in there, they get their stuff, they're ready to go. Kind of like, here's your systems that you're going to use, and then you check in on them a week later. Maybe the work orders have been crap they've been creating, or maybe the leases they've been put together aren't completely filled out, or they're stuck in hold status or whatever. And you get some feedback that says, I don't know how to use the tools you give me. So I'm like, oh, okay. The first reaction is, let me show you, or let me call the support person or training person. And then that consumes time and resources, and the person's still not ramping. Now they're like, let's say the second week of employment. They've had a bad experience. They've been kind of like a bit, it's been a bit of a condescending experience because they can't learn, but in fact, it's just they weren't taught well. And so they're going to go say, okay, I'm going to stop from happening this again. Because I'm going to build we're acquiring we just won 2 buildings. It's not going to hire another 8 people. And those 8 people I got to hire, they are going to be onboarded. So I don't want to do this all over again. So I'm going to take a look at what onboarding solutions are out there. Okay. I find Chasing Tomorrow. Who's going to fund it? Is that they're going to go to their HR and say, hey, or they're just going to pay on their credit card and say, you know what? I'm in charge. I'm the property manager of these 2 buildings. I'm going to put it on my credit card, and I want to get this figured out because I've got 8 people coming on board. Is that kind of what you imagine their journey?
No, because I don't see this as something that really rogue is the wrong word, but like a very committed, dedicated person who wants to do something kind of on their own to make it happen. I don't think fits for something for training products, because I think training products work best when there's consistency across the organization. I think there's a very clear awareness amongst those who work on the management side that this problem exists, and to the point that we've kind of accepted that it does exist. And I would say it's not just onboarding of new employees, it's every time you try to implement a new tech product, right? Or every time that new tech product launches a new feature that you'd like to leverage, but then you have to communicate that feature out to your organization and out to the people who work for you.
Totally.
And so there's a perpetual nature to this pain that it's just always there.
Because we're always software providers, we're always delivering new features. We're always communicating. We communicate via email blast because it's kind of the convention, and maybe probably not the best. So we do gap training all the time. And what I'm hearing from you is that even like as a software company, we could use it as well, because we could film out the gap training and push that out to our users with a link or URL, whatever it is, right? Rather than using Vimeo or something like that.
I'll come back to the kind of user question in a second, but I would just say, for me, I envision this functioning as the glue between prop tech and management companies, where a company like Iris could use it to create their support content, or when you launch a new feature, you could build something that shows people how to use that feature and the how-to. And then we have some really cool features where you can blend different projects together in the system, which basically means I can if I have a workflow at my company that touches multiple softwares, I can use a playlist to hit each of those and train the actual flow that someone goes through, as opposed to it being in disparate pieces all over the place.
Because alternatively, if it's just video, they could use YouTube, but really what you're producing is you produce those other modalities of content that then back up the structure of the message.
Videos are good for certain use cases, right? They're good to explain kind of the flow of how something works. But if you really want to show someone how to do it, the interactive demo works best for those first passes, where you're actually clicking through everything as if you were doing it. And then the step-by-step guides are a lot better for quick reference, because if it's a 3-minute video and what you need is a minute 2:15,
I know what you mean.
It's tough to get through. Whereas with a step-by-step guide, you can go right to the one thing. And I think, again, none of these are secrets. These are all well known. It's just a matter of being able to produce all 3 of those in parallel quickly, and in a cost-effective and time-effective way. So, going back to the user pain, with the people I've been talking to, everyone I've talked to so far has gotten it right. And my realization with the getting to hell yes was, it's not enough to have a great software product that solves the problem, because and again, going back to my concern on the buy side of why I created Guided, was how am I going to implement this? How am I going to create all the things necessary to do this well and effectively? And that's why we've pivoted to this. I think the technical term for it is a SaaS-enabled service model, where our software is the foundation of what we do. We believe in it. I think it's incredible. I'm very happy with what the team has built there. But I think a lot of what we're going to be doing going forward is working directly with management companies, or even working directly with prop tech providers, to build out that content and create that ecosystem where they have the tools and resources they need to give their teams to ultimately be successful. Um,
We
so
follow our approach. Like one of the things that we want to make sure people leave after we pitch them is that they're not going to have to do a lot of work,
yep.
right? And we're actually just doing a feature review this past week, and a lot of it is about how can we simplify the user experience because our onboarding is getting more complicated, and that feels scary, right? So
And how
like
can you break it up and segment it to where it's, not
yeah, so
so
totally,
overwhelming right when you see it?
yep. And it's a combination of addressing the training materials, but then also looking at our product and saying, hey, we need to simplify this. This is too complicated. Like we were just looking at one feature and there's like 27 different ways of doing it. We're like, whoa. This has got to be 3. So let's
Or one.
consolidate. Like it's 1, even better, right?
That was, I will tell you. So when I ran tech at Roscoe, we used Yard. We were Yardi shop. We used every Yardi everything. We were the most integrated Yardi company in the country. At the time, they may still be. But I got really, really kind of focused and almost obsessed with because I'd run training at that time for about 2 years, and I got really frustrated with there were 3 ways to do everything in Yardi, which made
Mm-hmm.
training really hard to teach best practices and the way you wanted people to do things.
Mm-hmm.
So I, over the course of about 2 weeks, went into all of our menu sets and stripped out all the other ways to do stuff. So there was one way to do
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
There's one way to create a batch, one way to create a guest card, one way, and ultimately that proved incredibly fruitful. It made training
Mm-hmm.
easier. It made everything easier. Um, and so just for what it's worth, I'm a big believer in simplicity. I'm a big believer in bringing everything under one umbrella whenever you possibly can, just from a uh, ecosystem, like one dashboard, one login. I
Mm-hmm.
think for people who have affinity for tech or who use a lot of tech, or who aren't touching these things every day, might think, oh, it's just one more dashboard, or it's just one more. It's not a big deal, but it is for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that recognition is something that I think a lot of times um, really brilliant engineers and developers, forget, is that yes, you solve this narrow problem, but you might be introducing complexity.
Well,
And
this is the whole thing of like we forget that there's energy, cognitive energy that is burned in making choices. And people really want to be told what to do in most cases and only have to make the decisions that they need to make. So I look at like, like this remote control here, like there's 3 buttons on it, right? Like these 2 different remote controls here. One's for Apple TV, one's the TV, right? Like there's just too much going on here. This actually does more than this does, and it's
yep,
simpler, right? And like those 2 different engineering approaches make things easier. The TV remote control is built to look like legacy TV remote controls that were invented 40 years ago, right? And so it's a simple, we're doing the exact same thing right now is we want to simplify it because it's too complicated to deploy. So making sure we get too far away from the hell yes side of things. Like one of the things that we're trying to solve for is faster deployments. We bring on people, sometimes we're bringing on 25 people, always going to be remote. And we do a lot of gap training to close that out, and that's problematic. That's expensive from our time because we're committing a lot of hours to a customer that maybe isn't the best use of everybody's time because you got to coordinate a schedule to a single hour that works for everybody. That's just a lot of effort. And so like the things that like from a what's blocking us. So the blocker there is we're trying to onboard people, which is revenue for us, right? That converts to usage, that converts to use cases, et cetera. And so we're blocked from revenue if we can't onboard people. And then even more severe, we're blocked from recurring revenue or recurring revenue growth if they don't they don't uptake, right? And so like our rhythm that we've got right now from a usage perspective is it's been really successful in the last like 6-7 months because we've been really focusing on the right buyers, the hell yes buyers that are compelled to use it because we're solving a mission critical problem. And then once we get over the hump of usage and over that cost of change, people are they're kind of on the flywheel motion, right? And so like when I'm here about the ability to create that content, we're also changing and deploying all the time. So like we're deploying today, I think as we speak, we're deploying some new stuff. So how do we communicate that to people? If I go invest like 3 months, and then I'll say it from our perspective, and I'll echo it with respect to an operator that's just bought software. If I've just invested 3 months of our dev time to build a feature, deploy it, and then no one uses it, I just threw that money out the door. If I'm an operator and I just bought some software, an easy button software, and I don't deploy it properly to the people that are supposed to use it, then I just threw my money out the door. And what's interesting is that, like, as software providers, we're motivated to make sure people use the product, and so we'll actually jump in and kick off training as an offer, right? This is a SaaS-enabled service that you're talking about, but we're kind of rebuilding the wheel every single time because the product's changed. So it costs.
And then when those
time
people, if those people end up leaving, you're starting back over at zero, especially when you're a new product that's not ubiquitous and not everyone's used it before.
And it's a role that has a high turnover. Like, we need to assume that if we onboard a batch of 10, that only 5 will be there next year, and there'll be another 7 that come on. And in that period of time, maybe 2 or 3 were hired and left. And so it's like that's a risk for a value proposition.
And how do you make that experience? How do you make that experience consistent for the 5 people who get hired after those 5 leave? Because the first 10 got you, right?
Yeah.
It got the full picture, and then there's a drop off, right, on everything that comes after that. So then you start, and then over enough time, you start getting people like, well, this software's not any good. And it's like, well, because they're probably not using it right. And why aren't they using it right? It's because of a knowledge loss over time. And it's really easy to say, well, we have all our documentation. Well, yeah, but let's go read all of that. Like, you have to have it in something that's like quickly, easily digestible, and where you've parsed it into, atomic pieces would be too small, but like, workflows of just like functions all set through, as opposed to something that's much bigger.
Yeah. It's the like the IKEA manual, where it's like, read this whole manual first, but no one does.
Yeah, everyone starts building.
And everyone just starts building right away.
Why do I have 2 screws left? Well, the couch is fine. We'll if it breaks, we'll figure it out.
It's pretty steady. We'll figure it out. It must be actually, we know for a fact that IKEA didn't throw in 2 extra screws, like, just to mess with you. They're not diabolical maniacs. And so, like, but we need to do that as well with how we deploy our training. And so it's like, there's I think I took some training years ago on like human thought, like how humans absorb information, and Minto method. It was like how you actually structure a message within or content within a slide presentation or a story, right? And it's like, how do you header, how do you introduce, how you bring people through, and then how do you close out? And like, that's not obvious when you're doing kind of training. We just got to throw in training at it, throwing people at it. There's got to be a methodology to conveying information, especially when it's like adult learning, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, it's with adult learning, it all has to start with what's in it for them, right? Because otherwise they completely check out. But then the other thing that happens, and I'm a victim of this sometimes, I have to be really mindful, is I know this intimately, but which means the way I approach it day to day might be very different than someone who knows nothing about it. And to be able to put yourself in the shoes of someone who's new to something and introduce it and teach it in that way is really hard. That's why great teachers are rare. It's people who are able to put themselves in that seat consistently, and then recognize that seat's always slightly different for each person. So you might have to come at it from a slightly different direction. And really, it was until just recently, with some of the advents of AI and the other tools that are available to us now, it was unrealistic to create all that content. So everyone kind of just shot for the middle, did the best they could. And that's why you see this is not just unique to property management or prop tech. Most software is only implemented what I would refer to as like 6 inches deep, right? Like, there's so much more that you could do with it, but you only kind of do what you could figure out right on the front end. And then it takes a power user, right, to come in and really evolve it. And I think at most management companies, they're still in that 6 inches deep phase. And they're not deriving the value they could out of their software. Like, CRMs are one of the first ones that come to mind, right? Like, most companies use CRMs as really expensive spreadsheets, right? They're not tracking everything. The data in isn't going in, which means the data out isn't really worth anything. And a lot of that's because those people haven't been taught the value of a pipeline in a CRM. They've been taught how to check the boxes of a CRM. Well, why does that happen? It's because there's only so much time available for people to be trained. And if you could simplify software training where it can kind of live on its own without a lot of that one-to-one interaction, then from a management company's perspective, now you're able to teach like the how and like the why around what's happening. And you start to get a lot more value out of stuff. And that's to everyone's benefit. It's to the CRM provider's benefit. It's to the, you know, the maintenance management and support and resolution benefit of just knowing how these things work. And I'd add one more. I actually thought of this because last time we talked, you were telling me about some of the like first pass triage that y'all are able to do.
Yeah.
And you know, a lot of times we're adding more tech to our residents too, right? Whether that's online, you know, creating your online portal or paying rent or submitting a work order or reserving a conference room or office space or right. So again, for me, the cool thing about Guided is I can also create a playlist that's a new resident onboarding package that shows them how to use all of that software and holds their hand through that process, or at least gives them the option of something to reference. And I think that's going to become more. I mean, ultimately, I think all of this gets embedded into software over the next 10 to 15 years. Right? Like software is going to have its own tutorial mode that's going to teach people how to use it. But in the meantime, like we have to do something to make people feel equipped to do their jobs well and to succeed. And most of the time when you hear people talk, you know, the reasons they leave is burnout or stress or overworked or, you know, all those are symptoms of the same thing, which was I was struggling. I didn't know what to do. And because of that, I had these feelings. And
I wasn't optimized for my job.
Yeah, exactly. And until we start making real headway there, we're not going to solve this problem. And it's a multi-billion-dollar a year problem in multifamily in terms of turnover and with what it costs.
So this is, I want to kind of, we're halfway through on a pause and kind of like summarize where we're at. So the problem that we're solving is basically ramp, right? A successful ramp of a new employee. And why the problem is intense is because there's high turnover in this role, and that's just that we're probably not going to stop that problem. I mean, we can mitigate it a little bit, but there's a natural turnover thing that is expensive. So we can own that and say there's natural turnover in this role just by the nature of the roles, and let's make training and onboarding. Let's reduce the cost of ramp by using a software, and let's use the cost of creating those accelerators and make that very low cost. And the outcome that we're looking to achieve is that we'll have less turnover because we've properly tuned people or optimized the resources to use the products that we use at our company. And we're going to own that library of assets rather than having them embedded in every single piece of software and maybe some FAQs. That's kind of that's where I'm at. Now, when I go to kind of like figure out and Google, I'm going to Google something, figure out what choices I have to solve those problems. What would you Google? What is your buyer going to Google? Like for us, it would be like, it might be, how do I centralize maintenance? Or it might be, how do I solve remote problems? Or it might be, how do I reduce my cost to serve, right? What are they going to, and we want to be on that response because the what they're Googling is in their terms about their problem. So your buyer, what are they Googling?
It would be best practices for change management, best practices for implementing software, best practices for software training. It would be that sort of thing because I don't, I mentioned this, the ability to create these things so easily has really only come about in the past 3 to 4 years. So there's not a lot of general awareness where, centralization is a big buzzword, right? That everyone's talking about. So you kind of have that in your head to go maybe to go Google or search. The shift in training that's happened over the last 12 to 15 years has been the digitization of training to get away from classroom training, and you have platforms like Fuse and there, Grace Hill's expanded their platform. There's a lot LMSs out there that are doing some of this, but it all comes back to content, right? Like what are you filling those things with that's
Yep.
specific to your organization, that's specific to your workflows and process, because everyone does a lot of these things slightly different. So there is a custom nature to it. So candidly, that's part of my challenge of like broad awareness of like, is there something that someone specifically Googling that they might find us kind of serendipitously? I'm not sure there is. So, I'm doing a lot of, I'm fortunate of having been in the industry for 20 years. I know a lot of people who are in those decision-making seats. I'm able to have a lot of kind of candid and direct conversations and say, I remember this pain because I felt it, right? And it was a real challenge for me. And I built something to solve it. And almost to a person, everyone who I talk to about it says, yes, I get it. And which then brings in the second piece is we just have to figure out timing.
Do you ever ask them the question? Do you ever ask them the question? And this is something that I've just recently started because, our product is fairly, I'll say this, there's a lot of no-brainers in it, but it still doesn't, not everyone's using it, right? So the question I ask now is, tell me why this wouldn't work. I'm actually seeking objections. So I'm seeking objections from the prospects because I actually want to hear them. I want to give them permission to express their objections that they might be hiding. And I want to hear
unless they say hell yes, there's always an objection, right? So it's just whether or not you're willing to go find it. And sometimes they may not know what it is. It's a feeling, right? Like that you have to help pull out of them. Time is the biggest thing. And implementation from the conversations I've had this far, or they've already spent a lot of time and investment and money building something out that solves 80% of this, and they don't necessarily want to rip all that out and come back with something new. And again, that's part of why I'm targeting primarily smaller management companies because they don't have anything in most cases.
Yeah. Well, so I'll kind of share our story, like in terms of like, okay, so I'm at that point where I've Googled something and I've got kind of three choices before me. And practically speaking, the three choices are usually someone train them, right? So I'm going to consume human hours, give them a handbook that's out of date, or your solution, or well, actually, I should back it up a little bit. I've got to create content is what the problem I got to solve so that I can train people. So now that's even a bigger hurdle because I've got, let's say I've hired 4 people and I've got to train them. So then the content I need to create that's just a bit of work. And so, and I'm doing my day-to-day job. So I'm going to, I'll either create the content with like screenshots and, or maybe not video it. I mean, I'd probably do a Loom is what I'd probably do. And then I'd video that and then I'd send them a Loom. And that's, that's peer-to-peer. That isn't like, something that everybody can use. And so consequently, it doesn't get that kind of traction and it's kind of janky and it's, it doesn't have all those different modalities to it. And that's how I kind of solve the problem today. So
we're telling people, give me 8 hours over 8 weeks and I will transform your entire new hire training process.
There you go.
Because we've got a process where because of how the content capture happens with the software, we can collaborate in very short time periods with management, members of the management team. We also have the benefit of me and some of the people who I pull in to help us out with some of this stuff, having worked in management. So there's a deep knowledge of who are the audience that we're building for. And it's 8 hours. It's basically a 2-hour discovery call, a 30-minute project review, and then recording sessions, which usually would take between probably an hour to 3 hours total. And then that's basically it until your stuff's done, and then it's reviews. And then we'll also handle a lot of the testing out with the existing teams of running people through it and making some small tweaks to make sure everything's really good as a final deliverable. And it's roughly maybe 8 to 10 hours over 8 to 10 weeks. And that's maybe spread across 2 or 3 people in an org. Bigger orgs, it might be a couple more, but it's, the response I got back that really made that light bulb go off for me was I was talking to someone who I've worked with for a long time, I've known for a long time, and the first question she asked was, how much time is this going to take my team?
Exactly.
And it's, it's interesting how, like, things, but then someone else says it and like echoes it back to you, and then you see it or hear it differently. And I immediately was like, oh, that's what, there's a strange irony that I built something to help with prop tech adoption, and it's still like the problem that I'm trying to solve is still my inhibitor.
Yeah.
But that was really eye-opening of saying, like, and going back to my experience being on the buy side, is people don't have time to implement these things. So
yeah. So is that one of the, like, respect to the objections? What are the typical objections that you hear? Like, so they've identified 3 alternatives. Let's call it 3 because it's what everyone does, and they picked. They're narrowing in on kind of your category of solutions. They talk to you, 2 competitors. You kind of present your the problem you solve, and then what kind of objections do you get?
The biggest one's time and implementation. Candidly, we haven't gotten a lot of negative pushback. It's been, let's figure out the time that this makes sense for us. Like, we have budgets going on right now, it's not the right time, or we have this, this is going on right now, or it's the end of the year, let's get to January. And so a lot of it's time and fit, which again is what led to this, 8 to 10 hours over 8 to 10 weeks, and we'll just do it all for you as an easy button. We'll build all the content for your HR system. We'll build all the content for Yardi or OneSide or whatever it is. We'll give you a package that you could just use. And that we've gotten a ton of like really solid feedback on. I think, as with all things, price can also be can be a little bit of a friction point. This while this software is fairly new, the market's fairly crowded. There's a bunch of people who jumped into it, as what happens with new tech. But very few of those people are really focused on training. Most of them are focused on facilitating product sales, which it could be used for, right, with the interactive demos. And that's and again, that's kind of why I've, just taking a little bit of a half step back. When your product's a commodity, which almost every software is a commodity, right? Like, you might have some sort of thing that makes it special, but it's not going to be transformationally different in most cases, unless you're just at the bleeding edge of what's happening. And even then, people catch up eventually. That's what happens with technology.
Yeah.
Then you have to find a way to compete that makes you one of none, right? Like, where you don't have a direct competitor where people can make that apples to apples comparison.
Yeah.
And so that for us has been that real push in the services. There's not another company that provides this product who has, experts in multifamily helping to build it out, who's going to build it all out for you, who's going to run all the testing to where you buy it and then you approve the project and then you get a finished product, right? Like, that doesn't exist in our space around training and learning and education. It doesn't really exist anywhere in software. And I feel like that's going to be a huge differentiator for any company going forward. And it's really where we want to hang our hat. So, so for the company where it makes sense, where they haven't invested, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in building out their existing training infrastructure, and who's wanting to implement new tech products, and who's wanting to give their teams the best opportunity to succeed, we get a lot of hell yes. We get a lot of yeses. We get a lot of people saying this makes sense. It's not inexpensive, right? Because there's a lot of work and labor involved, and I'm optimistic that we're gonna be able to build some stuff with AI to streamline that process over time. The cost is going to go down, for that really high quality service, over the next, call it, year to 2 years. But in the interim, if it's we're providing a value that so far exceeds the impact that the impact of what we provide so far exceeds the cost. It's really you mentioned earlier, it's a no-brainer, but it's a no-brainer in a different way, because it's not just a no-brainer in the product, right? Like, the biggest no that I got was all implementation related. So
Yeah.
we solved that.
So do you think so then just I'll play back to what you said earlier, like and again, I think that the problem with no-brainers as founders is we think that that's like agreement, but it really
no
is
brainer
like,
for us, right? Like,
yeah,
it's not necessarily no brainer for
us.
them.
The thing that we need to remember as founders is that they may even say no-brainer, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to prioritize this.
Yep.
They may see that this isn't when I now hear the word no-brainer, I hear this is not going to hurt us, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're lining it up to do it. And
Yep.
you kind of heard a little bit about that, from people saying, yeah, we can do this after budget season, or once these things that are consuming my priorities are over, then I'm going to do something else. One thing that we're learning is that there's always priorities.
Because there's never a good
And so
time to do this sort of stuff.
it's never a good time. So to get to the hell yes buyer, it's being aligned with their priority. And the priority is determined by what's happening to them, not by what they control. So an example might be, for us, they just got a new building, or maybe they're going to a new region, or maybe they have no staff they can hire. They've been trying to hire staff they've been trying to do one of the options. So like we present 4 options of way things can be done. And have you tried this? Yes. How did that go? Have you tried number 2? How'd that go? Okay. So you've tried all your options and you're still not getting success. Yes. Okay. Well, let's talk about this solution. They're like, yeah, finally. Cause like their goal is blocked. I'm trying to achieve X. In our business, I'm trying to achieve a great resident experience. And I need to solve the maintenance part, because the maintenance part of that resident experience is lacking. And we're seeing it in reviews. We're seeing it online. Okay. So now they got to do something about that. They've tried hiring more people. That doesn't work. They've tried outsourcing it. That's not working. They've tried, maybe an intermediary behind that. And that didn't work out that well because of other consequences or knockoff actions. So then they go, okay, well, I'm willing to try this new way of doing things. And so what we're looking for from the hell yes buyer is we're looking to track, and again, like we're still learning this, but tracking the things that are happening to the buyer that may be out of their control, that forcing them into a position of discomfort they want to change. Because when I think about what you're telling me about, like there are certain things that are blocking the objective that they want to activate for content creation and distribution. And it could be, we just if it's an owner operator, we just acquired 3 new buildings. Someone just bought like $1 billion of properties, right? So presumably there's going to be an onboarding experience, and that onboarding experience is going to be changed. So how do we make this onboarding, this integration, as seamless as possible? Are you going to take that training material that you built like a year and a half ago and onboard all these brand new employees? No, you're not. You're going to create new content right away because you want that merger to be successful.
Like to do that, but most companies aren't. Most companies aren't able to do that, and it's so unrealistic for that company to do that it doesn't even occur to them as something that they could do.
Yeah,
it's so it's so overwhelming to consider that most people will just move past it. And it's part of why we are where we are in multifamily as an industry. Is we've adopted a ton of tech. Some people did it really well. Some people didn't do it as well. But it's rare that companies have been able to keep up in terms of their backup, like their documentation, support, training materials, unless you're a large company, to keep up with that pace of adoption. So then everything's, spoken and translated from like person to person in terms of how to use it. And that's where you start getting into issues. So, it's software is just a tool, right? And it's only as valuable as the hand of the person that's wielding it. And being able to, and they have to understand how to use it, right? Like if you gave me a hammer and a chisel and a block of marble, I'm going to give you a bunch of small blocks of marble, right? If you give that to like Michelangelo or someone, I'm going to give you like a beautiful statue because I don't know how to use it in that way. And that, and I think that's where a lot of our teams are. I've been in this industry a long time. I've spoken to a lot of people who work on site throughout my career. This isn't new, right? Like this is not something that's just bubbled up since the pandemic. These issues have been festering for a long time, and that's part of what creates the challenge of really waking people up. And I think that's where I spend most of my time is in my conversations with people is just calling attention back to this issue and saying we can actually fix this. Like it's not something that we just have to accept, because it's not just a new building. It's not just it is something that happens in every management company across the country, like perpetually. It's like almost a recursive process. We're always hiring. We're always trying to teach people how to use stuff. We're adopting new things. We're trying to pull that in. Again, we touched on this earlier, but if the software upgrades and has new features, how do we pull that in and make the best use of that? Or my client, the owner, wants us to use this thing. How do we do that? And there's not, outside of just having a lot of manpower or spending, significant amounts of money with consultants, talking sometimes a lot of times 6 figures or more to have consultants come in and build this out. It's it's really challenging, and I think most companies just say, "Oh, we'll figure it out," right? If they end up saying yes to the product. So for me, my thought process also just in terms of product and sales is always, I don't want to just find a hell yes buyer. I want to make every buyer a hell yes buyer.
Well, of course, that's the whole. All of our goals is to create a repeatable sales cycle that is a low cost of sales, so we can be experts in that space, right?
So I'm always trying to dig down to, not as what the object. And I have a unique perspective in this industry because I worked in it for so long on the management operations side and being that buyer of what's their real objection. Like, they may say it's I guess project companies aren't necessarily told that often that we can only do 2 or 3 of these a year, or my team's burned out right now. We just need to pause. Some people may hear that. Other times they just hear no, or it's like it's not the right time. So digging past that and getting to, what are the underlying issues, and is there a way that I can solve those? And if the issue is how to implement it, how to integrate it with the broader systems, I'm fortunate that my product is built to do that. And that we can then facilitate that. And then, I alluded to this earlier. My goal is to essentially create a partnership program with prop tech companies, where if their content's in our format and a management company is using us, the management company could download the content from the prop tech provider and just have it, right? It's because how do you create templates for something that's somewhat bespoke, or that's like, I couldn't create a template for Iris on my own. But if you created it and then on the other side, a management company was using it, right? That creates a lot of really great synergy. And that gets back to that, how do we solve the actual problem of implementation? Because I think if you do that, a lot gets unlocked just naturally. Because there's an appetite for it.
Yeah, like something you said that I hadn't really thought of it before is that, like, not only are you saving the cost, right? And maybe this is something that can kind of angle in on the hell yes piece, but it's not only the cost, there's risk in using the software incorrectly. There's data risk, as an example. They're not filling out all the fields. They're choosing the wrong fields. And I was rolling up something that was, let's say someone types in an issue that's an emergency, but they actually schedule it 2 weeks out, right? That's going to cause collateral damage. And so, like, things that we need to de-risk might be something that prompts them to do something sooner, and not wait till end of budget season, but like, oh yeah, we are, aren't you hiring? It looks as though you're hiring, 35 people this week, or that, you've got 35 jobs open. So what are you going to do when you onboard those people? Well, we're going to put them through our training process. How's that working? Well, it's not that great. Okay, well, we can solve that problem for you. So when you hire those 35 people, they're going to cost you, it's going to cost you twice their salary to hire them, or at least in that first year. So why don't you reduce that cost risk? Like, why don't we, I think we talked about that in Austin. It's like, how do we reduce that cost? It needs to be framed as a risk, not just like a cost reduction, so that they're motivated to do something different. So did you know that if you're hiring, let's call it, you're hiring 10 people, let's call it 50K a year, so 500K. So 500K, it's actually going to cost, that's actually $1 million. So did you know you have 500K, that's the hiring and the onboarding expense. You got 500K here that's at risk. And that 500K kind of like rolls up. It's amplified by the actions that these people do. Because if they start putting in data wrong, that's very hard to undo.
Well, because then you start making bad decisions off of
they're making bad decisions.
Bad decisions off of bad data.
Yeah, then the Mr. and Mrs. Executive are making bad decisions because of the data that's deployed in your systems.
And the company that's trapped, there's companies that have like greater than 50% turnover rates, like within their organizations, like greater than 40 or 50%.
Oh, yeah, we talked.
If you're one of those companies that's trapped in that cycle, it becomes like a inward downward spiral, or like a self-fulfilling prophecy that just keeps going. Yeah, it's a leaky bucket, but then it can compound and get a lot worse, because then you have smaller teams that are spread thin trying to cover for the gaps that are there. Well, those people burn out faster and will leave. Your best people are spending their time holding the hands of like the new teammates and trying to get people up to speed. And just as they almost get them there, they leave or someone else leaves. So they're never really operating at the level that you would like them to operate at. So there's, and I've done sales long enough that people, I know it's not great to sell in the gray, but there's the very direct impact that you mentioned with like the 500,000. But if you really start to think about the ripples that come out of this sort of thing, it touches everything. And it's part of why I created this product. Is I sat down last January, thinking that the industry, again, as an operator, was horribly broken, and trying to figure out, why is it broken? Like, why have we been trapped with terrible resident turnover? Why are these properties that just aren't doing well at all, where we're giving people a bad life, basically, right? Like, if your home is not good, your life is not good. And how do we fix that? And for me, it's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it comes back to training and giving people the tools they need to make better decisions. And that has to start with, one, what we teach people, but also we have to create space to be able to teach them that. And right now, all that space is taken up with software training. So as a management company, if you really want to differentiate yourself, if you really want to pull yourself out of this constant hiring cycle and build teams that are talented and where you've cultivated that talent, right? Because people have been there and they've stayed there. You have to fix this, because otherwise,
when you go back and listen to this podcast, like that statement you just made at minute 57:22 was really compelling and powerful. And I think that's something that's worth leaning in on, because that was something that you said that like was I wouldn't say aspirational, but was like compelling, right? And then you're saying you have to fix this, right? Was like, I do have to fix this. I felt like I was saying to myself, I do have to fix this. And then the part that needs to land is, do I need to fix this now? And that's probably the next part. And the now might not be, is not driven by your product. The now is driven by my situation. And so the questions that I need to figure out, you need to figure out, are around what creates that commitment to change now, so that they don't bump you for budgets or just another priority, right? So it's like, well, when do the hire peak? When are you hiring these people? When do you get in the building? When is your situation going to change that's out of your control that you got to do something about? And then they're like, well, it's going to be, in 2 weeks or whatever. And they're like, well, then now you got to hell yes customer, because their circumstances changing.
And you find ways to mitigate risk, right? So for us, I'm really confident, based on my experience and really thinking we have a great product, that we can come in and do these transformations for people, and it will have a huge impact. So for the customers who are signing up with us right now, we're offering 60 days, all your money back. Like, if you're not happy after 60 days and we haven't delivered what we said we would deliver, let's give you your money back. And because I believe in what we're doing that much. And again, that helps get to that hell yes, because people are thinking, well, it's a big investment, and totally. Yes, the time is still being invested. But if I can say, if I'm putting my money where my mouth is, right, and saying, I will, if onboarding transformation's 30 grand and in 60 days you're not happy, I'll cut you a check. Not gonna argue with you. Not gonna, because I'm that confident that you won't want to displace this once it's in place.
Yeah.
And that's, that's a part of it. That's, you can't do in product led growth. You can't do in these other things where it's really a lot of like person to person, one to one for us right now. Um, as again, we've only been in business, we've existed for about a year now. Um, the product's been functional since June. I felt really good about it since August, where we got it working really, really well, really stable, really solid, um, and where it could sit as it is now for forever, like forever if we wanted to. We're obviously going to continue to improve it, but I have that confidence in what we built. So I also know that we don't have to be the biggest company in prop tech tomorrow, right? Like this is I'm in this business for the next 30 years. Um, and, and, and there's things that I don't know what I don't know yet that we'll just find from working with customers. So as we work with people, and there's stuff that we'll discover, whether it's doing a transformation or implementation of just the product on its own, that'll inform kind of how we continue to seek that hell yes in the future. But right now, a lot of it for me is like, what did I want and what was missing when I was trying to buy this stuff? And on the prop tech side, and what was I missing on the training side that I felt like was really inhibiting my teams? And I have a lot of firsthand knowledge there that we're trusting and leaning in on, and it's been paying off so far.
That's outstanding. Outstanding. As we kind of close this down, what's the given your experience of selling in the selling now and then previously, as you're starting to listen for people that are, I would even tabulate the causation for hell yes. What's the one piece of advice you'd give people who are out there selling multifamily?
The one that I remind myself of before every conversation with a customer, because when I don't, I forget it. Which is talk less, listen more. Ask questions. We fall in love with our products sometimes, and we're very excited to tell people about what we built. And I'm actually someone who's always sold with passion. Like that is why people typically buy from me, is because I'm so like excited about things. But that only works for a very small segment of the market. And when you're trying to sell on value, which is 100% what we're doing, we know what we provide is a tremendous value to organizations. You have to take the time to understand where that fits, and then be able to echo back to them. I understand your problem. Let me explain it back to you, like what I heard. These are your actual pain points. Or when you said this, did you mean this? Or like, making sure you have pure clarity. And once you have that, then it gets really easy to present a package, or your product bundled with, whether it's bundled with services or whatever their hot buttons happen to be. You're able to come and say, I have a way to overcome, or I have a way to overcome that objection. Here's what it is. But you only get that from asking questions. Whereas if you just talk at people and say, look at my great thing, you have to get it. It's a no-brainer, without being able to echo that back right through and make them be the ones that tell you it's a no-brainer versus you. You end up stuck where you're like, that was a great conversation. Why aren't they buying? Well, because you didn't actually listen. And you have to spend most of the time asking questions. Like every response needs to be a question. Like, so when you said this, what did you mean? Or when I hear you say that, I hear this. Does that mean, right? Like you're constantly digging, at least early in the conversation, and not be too excited about selling. I think that's, when I did biz dev for management companies, I would always tell people I sell without selling. I don't ask people to hire me. I give value until they hire me. And to the extent that you can find ways to do that, and how you ask them questions, and how you help give suggestions or solve problems or be available and be a resource, that's ultimately what builds relationships. And that's ultimately what sells like B2B products.
So listen with intent,
Listen,
active, have the double click ready. Like think about the double click. so that you can do the ask and what else kind of conversation. And
Don't be in a hurry.
Yeah,
Don't be in a
I love
hurry.
it.
Like, you're not going to close someone in the first conversation if it's any sort of big ticket item, which all software would be.
Yeah,
So if you know that's not going to happen, then why try? Like, it just puts you in a weird spot.
yeah. Have a plan for those the call 1, call 2, call 3.
Yeah.
Right, different objectives.
And be
Awesome.
willing to allow what they say to deviate, have that plan deviate.
Yeah.
Like, don't be so rigid in what you're trying to get to. That's why, I kind of think CRMs killed sales in some ways, because everything's sold on a freaking drip campaign now, which is a one size fits all cookie cutter like approach. That, sure, if you scale that out to a million people, yeah, you'll get 50,000 customers. But if you don't, if you actually talk and listen to people, right? Like, again, with what we're doing, where it's a bigger picture thing, or it's a bigger ticket item, it works so much better than just trying to, game it, or find a hack to for your go to market. It's like, no, just listen to people and then solve their pain points, like we've been talking about.
Yeah, I've been finding the outbound campaigns of, it's the defense systems of the prospects are so significant that it's not as productive as it used to be. You're just not getting through the inbox. You're not getting open. I mean, my email, I probably have I don't know, like I probably get 100 emails a day, but I probably only get really 10 that I need to respond to, or 15 I need to respond to. And that's like, the rest of it's just all stuff.
And maybe to bring this all the way back around a little bit, why does that happen? Because the people who are doing these drip campaigns and who are doing all this outbound haven't necessarily been trained really well on anything except how to use their software, right? So they don't understand the sales theory and the things that they're actually trying to accomplish in terms of solving problems for their customers. They're checking boxes. And because that experience has been so bad for us as the consumers, we now have walls up and don't pay attention to it, because most of it is so bad that we just tune it all out. And that's exactly what's happened with prop tech. It's exactly what's happened with professionals and multifamily. And it's part of what I'm trying to solve, with Guided being the first of what I hope are many tools and products that do that.
Yeah, totally on board. Agreed. Who should we talk to next?
Well, in terms of prop tech stuff, my two favorite products right now are probably Rentana, which is a revenue optimization platform. It's the only one of those platforms I've ever actually liked. I'm not a big fan of revenue management. I think it killed the industry because it made people stupid because they don't understand their pricing anymore. I also don't know if it actually worked, because we were in a massive bull market for the past 15 years. But so I really like Rentana, and then I'm a huge fan of Rent Grata. I don't know if you know Zach and Ben over there. How every management company in the country is not using their product to help with leasing. Like, I would take them over a CRM, because it's social proof. Their product allows your residents to talk to prospects, or your prospects to talk to residents in a controlled environment. So it's social proof, which is how people are buying today, almost everything. And then go back to Rentana. I like Rentana because it helps. It does a really good job of explaining to you what it's giving you, so it can help people who don't necessarily understand how pricing works, which is a lot of people in the industry today, to gain that understanding through using the software. And I just like I like the way they go about setting rates. They recognize that price isn't the only variable. And that's what YieldStar and LRO and all those spent a decade trying to convince us that price was the only variable. It's not.
I'll check that. I am super interested in that space, from a curiosity perspective. Obviously, it's in the news, so it'd be helpful to kind of understand a little bit more. And we all have experiences with price through hospitality or airfare, and so be curious to kind of get the take of it in terms of the multifamily spot side of things. So I'll reach out.
And those are weird. Those are hospitality and airfare are very actually different experiences, because people will buy things on different days, or wait to buy things, or maybe shift things around a little bit. Whereas home it's a lot more intentional purchase process. And a lot more moment in time. Like you, as opposed to like airfares, you might check a couple times over the course of a few weeks. Rents, when you're shopping it's for an apartment, it tends to be a little bit more narrow. I have one other thing I was going to say there, but oh well, it's obviously not that important if it ran out my ears. So.
How can people get a hold of you if they want to kind of touch base and learn a little bit more?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, Stephen Rea, REA on LinkedIn is I'm somewhat active there. I'm trying to get more active. But you can definitely reach out to me there. And then guided.studio is our website for Guided. Just wrote a book on onboarding. So Guided, which is actually what this QR code goes to. There's a landing page where you can sign up to get our ebook on the impact of onboarding on turnover, and presents a framework that you don't have to hire me to do it. Like I'm doing this because I want to improve the industry. So if someone's has the bandwidth and has the team and doesn't want to hire us to do it, but wants to use this framework, I'm confident this framework would work. And that's what the book gets into. There's a part 2 that's a kit that gives you templates and forms and everything that you need to do it. So those are the best bets for now.
Very
and
cool.
I say Stephen at chasingtomorrow.ai.
Right on. Perfect. Excellent. We've caught that. Otherwise, we'll have more in the show notes. Excellent. Well, for everyone listening, thanks for listening today. If you're on the LinkedIn Live, this will be pushed out in a podcast, the Getting to Hell Yes podcast. That's on Apple and Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. Appreciate everybody for listening to the show. Any comments appreciated, put them right on LinkedIn, and Stephen and I'll jump on those and add to it. Thanks everyone for listening, and looking forward to some more. Looking forward to hearing what you guys are up to. Take care.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me, Guillermo.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen.